All right, welcome back, folks. I say welcome back. Welcome back to the channel. Well, if you've seen the video that we did for the Group A of the European RMR, then you already know what's happening in here. You already know that Thorin is joining me for this one, which of course is a great guest to have. You know, we're getting the best of both worlds. We get all the knowledge and history for the tier 1 teams, and then I'm joining in with some tier 2 fanboying and saying, well, this team is gonna upset, this team is gonna upset, and then nothing of it comes true. But yeah, in case you haven't watched the Group A, you still have some time, go and check it out. Now, Thorin, we're gonna get into this one. Now, we're gonna miss all the how are you doing part, because we already did that for a video that we actually recorded 30 minutes ago. So we are gonna dive straight into it. Now, me and you had a conversation about comparing the two groups, and how you put it in the previous video was Group A seems to be the one with less top teams, but more upset potential coming out of the tier 2 guys. Group B seems to be the ones where all the top teams are stacked. So does that mean that you're just not expecting a lot of surprises going into that second one?
I would just say it's more like the surprises to me is more things like how the top teams fill out, like who's top 3, who's 5th, who has to struggle, who's going to go through easily.
Sure.
The difference is, I think when you go to the bottom, this is also where name value is different in CS now because of how active tier 2 is. Like, so the joke is, if you look at the bottom 8 names in this tier list, as you're showing on this RMR rather, if this was like 6 months ago, a bunch of them would be really dangerous teams, but actually some of those names is more the name value is making you think. Like some of those teams have they're not actually as good as they were on the last major cycle. So I just feel like there's less. Like, here's the difference. I could see RMR Group A actually having some, like, complete random team just makes it through. I think in this one, it's more likely that if you just look at those top 8, like, you could easily just have the 7 out of those top 8. Like, you could very easily play out that way, you know?
Yeah, is there a specific couple teams that you're looking at when you say they used to be a lot more solid, let's say if the tournament was happening 6 months ago, that now are being a little bit underwhelming?
I mean, I would say the obvious ones to me is I think if you went back in time, the 9 Pandas team was way more dangerous previously. If you remember,
they qualified for the previous major.
Yep, they did. That was the one where what was the name? Fucking Gamer Legion with Snacks just got in because they couldn't like get the visas or something mad at the last second, right? So that team was way more dangerous a few months back when they were sort of cooking and they were going hard in tier 2. I feel like now I don't think they're going to be as scary personally. I would maybe even say the same thing about PARIVISION, mate. This was another team where you look at the lineup, you're like, there's some pretty solid players here. Like if this was like when they first made this lineup, I was a lot more like, oh, this could be like a top. It's another one of those teams where it's why I actually do think there is an absurd amount of talent in the Russian scene because they have all levels of team in that. They don't only have like a top team. They have everything. Like this is like a bet boom from the other group. Where on paper you go, this should be a better team, but it just kind of doesn't seem to ever get the results for me.
One thing that I guess we can say, like a comparison to the bet boom team, you're looking at PARIVISION. They just signed dastan as a coach.
That's a big one. Sure.
Are you putting a lot of emphasis on that? Yeah, because dastan used to be on VP for such a long time. He started it off even on a Vanguard, if people remember, with James. So is there a world in which he just joins in and that team goes to an entirely different level? Because obviously they're working with a pretty young in-game leader of Alpha, and it could be a little bit difficult when you don't have such a well-drilled coach. But do you think over that short amount of time with dastan on the team, this PARIVISION lineup actually has the potential to look more like the team that it should be on paper?
I do in a way, because like one thing that I think a lot will probably put a lot of people off dastan in terms of his reputation is they're going to think, well, who was it in those VP squads? Was it James or dastan who like implement that style and the saving and the bit? Well, all I'll say is this. The dastan guy's been gone for months now, guys, and the exact same player still exists within James VP. Like, as far as I can tell, those weird, silly vetours where they like are notorious for having like, 40% win rate on a map and they just pick it themselves every time and then lose on it all. That still happens. So as far as I can tell, that wasn't the dastan guy like forcing James to do that. That feels like that comes from James. I have to say, that sort of makes me remove a lot of sort of the limiting factors from how he might be as a coach. I can even imagine maybe he can do different things with this team he couldn't do with that squad. I also think when you look at the actual roster, like if people don't realize, like this is actually the perfect sort of team for someone like Kickert to still play in because he's at the end of his career. He's not there to be like a fragger and a star. And if you look at those two players, right, I think Patsi was so fucking criminally done by that team Liquid time. It was gross because one, remember, I want people to really think about this. He didn't just get to join that team and go, hey, I've got all your Kindar spots now. He had to do it while your Kindar was still there and learning to be his IGL. Like, that's a nightmare. And then the other player that joined, remember, well, you obviously know this was like a no-name Bulgarian player player who had enormous pressure. I think that lineup was like a very, very hard task for everyone involved. I think that was like, there was so many moving parts and things that I had to figure out. So I think sadly, because of that era, people think Patsy's shit. This guy was pretty good before that. I always thought, like, just getting back to a Russian teammate, this is a guy who obviously has skill as a fucking rifler, aggressive rifle player. Art Frost, if people don't know, I've always felt like, in a weird way, I actually think too much pressure was put on Spirit this year, specifically Donk and Zontix, who are rookies, because they got Shiro and then they won that kind of 8-0. I've always thought, in a weird way, it would have been a lot fairer to the careers of Donk and Zontix if Art Frost had stayed and it had just been a bunch of rookies that are talented coming up. We would never have put. Think about this. We put the pressure on them that we don't even put on fucking Mouse guys. We act like they're FaZe Clan. It's like, we're not winning now. Change the team. What's going on?
Yeah.
They're like rookies and beginning players. So if people don't know, the Art Frost guy absolutely could have been in the mix with those guys. Donk and fucking Zontix. He was a good player. He was a clear prospect as an AWPer. It's just, if you get offered Shiro, that is one of those names, like the famous one a few years ago, where Nork came in one day and they went, sorry, we've replaced you with Device. And even he went, yeah, understandable. I'll pack my stuff then. Because even you can't complain. So I think actually, if you look at this squad on paper, mate, it's actually pretty spicy. I don't know the alpha guy that you're mentioning, so that's obviously a key factor I can't predict on there. But I think if you look at like the pieces, you've got some pretty solid pieces in the roles. I might even argue some of these might be slightly overqualified.
I would agree. I agree with actually everything that you said right now. And I feel like, especially the Patsi and Arfrost points, I think are very fair, because Arfrost was not going to get removed from Spirit. He was actually playing good on Spirit if they didn't sign Shiro. And I honestly think that Liquid might have ruined Patsi for a little bit. I really hope that he recovers, but I just find it really difficult for a young guy that gets put. And it was the same issue with Rainwaker as well, right? The guy that came in from 500. Because both Patsi, obviously Patsi had a lot more experience on Spirit. He played a major semi-final. He was great in Stockholm. He had a couple good runs, Antwerp as well. But you're looking at both Patsi and Rainwaker coming out of teams that are speaking their native languages, and they've never played international Counter-Strike. You throw them in Liquid in that shithousery of a team that was being called by Ekinder, which I still count back, and I still don't really like and understand the thought process there. And then the two of them just get blamed for all the poor results, and they played, what, 4 or 5 events, not more than that. So it kind of feels like it might have ruined the confidence, and I honestly hope that's not the case, because I really like Patsi as a player as well. And I think that this is what makes PARIVISION maybe not a potential dark horse, but at least an interesting team to watch and see their development now with dastan as a coach. But moving forward, there's a couple other things that I want to discuss, and this is a bit more of a broader conversation here. Because of the reason that we have so many top teams here on paper, someone eventually is gonna have to. We have a saying in Bulgarian, by the way. I'm gonna give you some culture right now. We say blow the soup, which pretty much means flop it. They're just gonna shit their pants. So you're looking at it, because I hold a couple teams here to a pretty high standard. First of all, I think 3D Max any day of the week is ready to get the spot of VP or big, or maybe even an Astralis. But if you're looking at the list of teams here, is there someone out of the top teams that you have zero doubts about, and there's someone that is making you a little bit worried?
Well, the interesting thing about this actual group is, I might shock people with this, but actually, I'm actually more confident, and also sound weird, I'm more confident that Spirit will make it out than G2. Now, that might sound mad, because on paper, G2 wins events, don't they? Whereas, like, Spirit to even make this blast final, I mean, first of all, they had an easy bracket, you know, they didn't get G2 either. Like, you might think, but the reason why I say that is this. I think if people look, I think Spirit actually gets underrated, mate, because people don't seem to realize they typically only lose to the absolute best teams in the world. Like, it's pretty hard to beat this squad, because one of the things I do think works about their team is I do think the roles are pretty well figured out in this squad. And again, it's another team that's very streamlined. No one's stepping on anyone's toes. No, everyone knows what they need to do. Even if you do that famous knock everyone does of like, yeah, but Donk has to carry harder than anyone. But he does. Bro, he does though. Like, he doesn't do every game. He's not literally God. But I tell you what, for a rookie, it's unbelievable how often he does carry the game and just do his shit and do what only he can do with a rifle. So the difference is, I think if you look at this particular field of teams, I'm very confident Spirit gets out against this squad. Like, they've got the map pool. I think now they've even got the experience. I don't think anyone, by the way, can fuck with that duo of Shiro and Donk. I think those are just two players that are overqualified. Whereas the difference with G2 is, look, I would also very confidently take them to get out the group. But I do do think their team is way more of a crapshoot. Like this team here would be my joke. This team is like a fucking Dungeons and Dragon party. Like it's like you don't actually just go, oh, I'm good, so I'm going to do this. It's like, right, now roll the d20. All right, you got a 15. Yeah, you win easily. Oh shit, it's 4 this time. You get nothing. Like this team, you can't even predict how many T rounds you're going to get on a map. Like you can take even the maps they're good on. You can never know. Are they going to get 10 T rounds? Or are they going to get 3? And by the way, they might win or lose the game either way. I feel like this team's variance is so crazy. So I do think, look, I'm obviously going to take them as a team to get out, but I'll say I think Spirit has more of sort of like a consistent playing style I can sort of rely on in a way.
Yeah, I think a comparison probably could be made. I'm looking at Spirit, and I'm remembering Heroic with Yabi, Stown, and cadiaN when they had that
That's not a bad one.
amazing streak of just group stage passings with absolutely flawless results, right? And it kind of feels like it's the same case with Spirit, because you're saying obviously a lot of people are going to be critical because they will just look at the ceiling and forget that Zontix and Donk have been playing tier 1 Counter-Strike for 1 year, if that, right?
Yes.
And Chopper didn't used to be a tier 1 in-game leader. He was always a good in-game leader, but he's never been on that level. Magix, I guess, all right, but never been higher than Chopper either. Shiro's the only one that is actually used to playing tier 1 Counter-Strike on this team. And that's what makes it so much crazier, because it doesn't, like, they peaked really early, right? They really did, and really quickly. But that doesn't mean that they're just going to fall off.
And let's be real, that Katowice was kind of fool's gold. Like, I'm sorry, this is why, if you notice at the time, except for people working the event who understandably were hyping it, a lot of people who are analysts did say, like, hey, I'm still sort of like holding and waiting to see, like, can they even replicate this? Because I even said it at the time, the way they played at that Katowice, I'm sorry, they were either, like, secretly the greatest team to ever play Counter-Strike, and they've just revolutionized the game forever, or it was just a crazy overperformance, and it was sadly a crazy overperformance, right? Like, they never really played like that again. They've been very good, but like I think that was like the one-off occurrence of, like, you know, a blue moon, a perfect scenario happened that we'll never get again. So I do think in some ways that made everyone. That's why I think they're underrated, mate, because everyone expects them to be the kind of Katowice team. It's like, you got to get past that, guys. Again, if you just think like I said, if you think of the fact 2 of the players are rookies, some of the other pieces, like you said, are used to being sort of also runs and not in contention to win the tournaments. Actually, they're still tracking totally fine. Like, by the way, they just made a final the other day, guys. Like, they're still making playoffs all the time. They still do sometimes win the big game over the other top teams. Like, for me, if you consider them more like a rookie core team, I think they're tracking perfectly fine, mate. And I think actually right now, like I say, I think they'd be odds on to make this major. I would be very surprised if they didn't.
Yeah, I think G2 and Team Spirit, although we did say that there's more top dogs on this group, I think here is a lot easier to distinguish the top 2 teams of the group than in comparison to Group A. Because you're just looking at G2 and Spirit and you're like, well, everyone else could actually shit the bed. Eternal Fire and Astralis are probably the next 2 in line, though, right? They probably are.
Yes.
I want to hear your opinion on Astralis, because not a lot has changed for Eternal Fire. I think they're just coming in, and I feel like they still have the potential to even make it to the playoffs of the major. I just look at them as a team that could still do that. What do you think about cadiaN on Astralis now that he's played a couple events with them? Even one with, you know, an injured arm, broken arm, or whatever, where he actually played his best officials when he had a broken hand. But what do you make of that Astralis team now? You feel like now with cadiaN on the lineup, there's a bigger chance that we actually get the faces of Stown and Yabi that a lot of people wanted to see from the start of the year but didn't?
My problem is I do feel like if you looked in the era when Device was the IGL, which was most of this year, I do feel like, unfortunately, they fairly quickly hit a plateau and they never broke through it. Like, they just got to a certain level. And in fact, you even noticed it had the worst quality. It looked way worse, the same things in the playoffs that they did in the group. They were just group stage merchant, basically. So for me, they did cap out a bit. I don't know, because here's the problem. On the one hand, I do think just taking IGL off Device means I think Device will be a more impactful AWPer. So that helps. That gives you better firepower. The problem is, I just don't buy cadiaN to be a rifle IGL. I mean, you've already seen, unironically, he's tried to pick up the AWP a bunch of times when it's possible in the game. I already think he desperately wants to be on the AWP still. And then secondly, I just don't really feel him as an IGL overall in this squad. So I actually personally have a take that I think is quite different to other people. I think a lot of people are very positive because of that blast where they were sort of getting some like upset performances. I think personally, I think it's a little bit of a honeymoon initially as well. So I want to wait and see. I'm kind of a bit, for me, the jury's still out on this Astralis. I'm not sure if they're actually even going to be good or if they'll just be all right.
I think it's a similar conversation we could be having with a bit of a different nuance to the one that a lot of people are having for about Astralis at the start of the year, because they had a couple of good results, if you remember, and then everyone was throwing themselves and saying that this Astralis team is the next big thing. They're going to be a top 5 team. They're going to be a title contender, and then you were like, well, yeah, okay, they have the firepower, but give them a couple months, give them a couple weeks. Let's wait and see the first big disappointment, because it's inevitable for a top team to go through at least a couple disappointments per year, right?
Yes.
So let's see how they react to that. Well, they didn't react well to the first big disappointment that they had on
No,
Astralis.
no.
So now cadiaN comes in. And I know they're going out on the interviews and they're saying, you know, the energy is good. We're on the right page with stan and Yabi. We love the fact that cadiaN is back and we're playing with him again. Everything's good. Device is happy that he's back to opening is an in-game leading. What happens? Does all that bad blood come back magically when something goes horribly wrong for Astralis? And is it going to be, again, people turning around towards cadiaN being like, you know what, you're shit? And is that thought going to be to the back of the mind of cadiaN as well? Because if you know that those guys wanted to remove you from one team already, now you're going into this one, you have big expectations. What are the chances that he feels like maybe if things go wrong, he's going to be the one to get blamed again?
Well, this is actually an area where I think there's a bit of nuance here that hasn't been that drilled into. People just referenced it early and then they forgot about it. They sort of did that Men in Black thing where they woke up the next day and never referenced it again. If you ever go and read the interviews and then look at everything that was said about that blast where they did the weird substitution where they like lied and said bro was ill, but he wasn't. So good. When if you go and look at sort of the because remember it was all based on the fact that they didn't register cadiaN in time, which doesn't make sense, Ted, because if this is the player they were trying to sign and they wanted to sign him and they wanted him for blast fault, they could have done this ages ago. They could have got the deal done. So basically what it was inferred, if you sort of read around that story and what people were saying and sort of read between the lines, it was inferred that actually this might have even been like they had a shortlist and cadiaN might have been like fourth on the list or something crazy.
Sure.
So I actually think a lot of how people have framed this as sort of like the meme of like, you know, Stown being like, hey, cadiaN, you know, like, hey, let's get back together, bro, and conquer the world. I don't think that is what happened. In fact, I even got the implication personally. This might even be like an org motivated decision. Like they had a list of people. They knew they had to make a change. They maybe couldn't get, you pick who it might have been. Was it Zyphon? Did they have an actual IGL coming? Who the hell knows? Was Huxley on the list, but then the coach featured it, the play. There's all sorts of drama. So
sure.
The reason I bring this up is I don't think it's actually as clear that everyone, as you're alluding to, I don't think it is clear that everyone's committed to this project and that what they're really doing is like, okay, cadiaN, we understand, you know, you changed it from IGL, ARPA to just rifle, and you're going to be working with these players again. But, you know, you've got like the 8-month runway. Don't worry. This first major. No, actually, this might be like a lot of pressure on him because I get the sense, whether that means the lineup stays or not, I get the feeling other players in Astralis, it might just be more like a sports team where you come along one day and it's like, here's who you play with. But it's not who you chose or who's your first. That's just as a professional, you just have to play with him, which first of all ain't a great look for Astralis because this doesn't seem like Real Madrid, mate. This doesn't seem like you just take 11 players and go and play. They seem like they do need to be cohesive. And then I also do worry, I've got to say, about when you look at this squad, I think there is enormous pressure that people aren't thinking about here, which is you've got to remember this piece of trivia, Ted. Astralis didn't qualify for the last 4 majors.
Yep.
Like you can, if you're the Astralis org and you're paying people like the ones who get the paid in the mega box are the ones on the hot seat, mate. Device, Stown, Yabi, you are getting paid a massive amount of money. You've been acquired for massive amounts of money, not to just fucking fail RMRs, mate. Like I know the other ones can't all be your fault. Device wasn't even there for all of them, but like that does accumulate. Like the org, the pressure is going to be enormous to make this. So I think for them, unlike a lot of the other teams, there isn't the same sort of like, if we make it, we make it. If we don't, I think it's like life or death for these guys. And then lastly, I'll just throw this out there. The other reason why I'm not as big a fan of this Astralis lineup, I don't actually think any player on paper is bad. Like I don't really know what cadiaN the rifle is going to be like. But I also think the thing I hate about this squad is it actually looks so crowbarred together. Like this doesn't look like the one I would contrast them with in a minute maybe is I'm a more big fan of people know of Heroic because I like the roles in Heroic. Like again, it's streamlined. Again, there's no overlap. Everyone knows what they're doing. This team, when I watch them, I'm just going to say it right now. I actually think the person who's the most fucked in this team is Stair.
Yep, absolutely.
Bro, the entire time he's been here, he's shown that he actually probably is someone who, in a normal Danish team, would be like the rising talent. Like this would be the player people would be saying like for next year, if they can be, you know, a top 10 team, maybe he could be a HLTV top 20, maybe he could be 20th or something. That conversation doesn't even happen because the whole time he's been here, it feels like they just push him into other roles. And unfortunately for him, the people with bigger names take what would be his role. Like I feel like if you started a team tomorrow and you built around this guy and another really good, like an ARPA, he'd be a much better player and people would actually be considering him like a true talent at the moment. Whereas sadly, I get the feeling he's sort of pushed to the outskirts. So I also wonder about the whole role clash. How long does that last? Because I always say this, another reason honeymoon periods exist exist is because when someone joins a team, initially you're all focused on making them welcome. So you're like, oh, don't worry, you can
Yeah.
still have this spot here and I'll give you this.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, mate, 3 months in when it's going to shit and you're all going to get fired if you lose this next game, that's where you're not going like, hey, after you're going, actually, I'll take that this
Yeah.
game. You can fucking play that spot. That's what I want to wait for. So I'm waiting. That's probably a month or two away. But I'll tell you what, this could trigger that. Like, obviously, this is a massive hurdle. Isn't it? Like I say, imagine even being in Astralis and knowing you bombed like 5 majors in a row. It's inconceivable.
Yeah. Also, by the way, just to add to the point that you were making, when you're joining a team, you're a lot more willing as well to join in and say, you know what, I'm going to do whatever the team needs. And then a couple months pass by, the pressure is starting to build up. You're being put in some unfortunate situations of, let's say, a support player, an anchor player, the guy that has to drop guns running first every single time. It sounds all right. On paper, it's good. But when you've been doing that for 6 months and the results are shit, you're going to be the one to get blamed. There's going to be frustration building up. And I completely agree. I didn't feel like Bro was doing a bad job on Astralis as well. I just feel like Ster and Bro are just the two guys that are in line when something is not working out because it's easier for the big guys to blame it on them. And that's the reason I agree with you. I really like Ster as a team. And let's say, even if you want to go on a wild one and say, what if TSM, for example, pick up Ster? He's undoubtedly going to be the best player on the team.
He'll
probably
be the star player, yeah, of course.
Exactly. So yeah, I have my reservations towards Astralis as well, and I really like the reference that you make. I think they have shown that the organization has an affinity for making decisions, really important, crucial decisions, without really consulting with the players too much over time. So I can definitely see the angle where cadiaN wasn't the number one option, and it was something like that. Although I really like cadiaN as a player, I love the passion. I know it's a little bit controversial in the character part, but I really admire the passion that he's got for the game. Still though, you did
They have some good
mention-
players, though. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, it is just an RMR. Like, they can
mean-
fuck around some BO1s to beat almost any of these teams. Yeah,
They could. On paper, they could, of course. You mentioned Heroic as the conversation was going, and I'm really happy that you did, because I'm actually in love with that lineup as well. And I know you're big up on degster as well, because I've seen the tweets and I've liked every single one of them. Some of them retweeted, because I've been a degster fan for, well, since he started streaming FPL before he joined Spirit, by the way, when he was on Espada, which was the Spirit Academy. Because you wouldn't believe me how many Face It games I've lost against this guy, and every single time I've never tilted.
Oh, he was a demon back in the day.
I've never tilted once. I was always like, fair enough. You know what? This guy is great. Please sign my profile, bro. That was like 2018.
Right.
So you're looking at Heroic on paper. I'm just gonna dissect it real quick here. You have Kixan, who made his name under the Apex banner, showed that he's really easy in-game leader to work with, really good person to work with. By the way, doing an interview with him really soon, so that's going to be an interesting conversation. Show that he's really easy to work with, really nice guy. That's the feedback, or at least the words I've heard from everyone basically that's been on the team with him, even in the Balkan scene, and we're notorious for being incredibly toxic bitches at times, but everyone's saying only nice things about him. You have Nerds, who I think undoubtedly there's no point arguing that he is still one of the best riflers in the game. You have Tested and Shush, which is probably the most underrated supporting duo in tier 1 Counter-Strike right now. And then you have degster, who used to be that type of guy that people would compare back in the day. I mean, I'm not sure if that was a popular thing, but you look at the way that m0NESY went into G2, it was around the same time when degster went into Spirit. For me, it was always exciting seeing those two play against each other, because I felt like degster could go toe-to-toe with him, and sometimes even be better in the server. And then you have Sol, who I rate really highly as a coach. And then you have the assistant coach / analyst, the Feed, who used to work on Heroic, and used to work on Sprout, sorry, and has been around. And I know him from the Balkan scene. Obviously, he used to coach a couple of Balkan teams, but I know he's a guy that puts in a lot of work. So you're looking at Heroic. Role-wise, everything makes sense. In terms of the coaching staff, I back the coaching staff to be probably one of the best in the tier 2 space right now, honestly. This team is just sick. I don't have any reservations. Do you have any reservations? Because I think they're going to do really well.
No, I also think the part I always stress, because no one else ever brings it up, so I think they just don't think about this factor, is people try to act like, I mean, they don't just do it now, mate. They were doing it from the second he joined the team. People try to act like whatever you see today from degster, that's his cap. That's as good as he can be.
Sure.
If he's not good in this game, then it was a bad pickup. And I always tell people, You have to remember they only picked him up right before the player break, so they barely played any touch. They played like Yalla Compass and something else, you know. And then if you remember, because right after the player break, he had like the blast groups or whatever he couldn't make, and then he had
Yeah.
like the first match at Cologne he couldn't attend or whatever. And obviously he didn't go to Dallas, right? They had Nikados there.
Yeah.
So if you actually think about it, even within the few months he's played, first of all, a whole month has to come out for the player break, and then secondly, even had events where it was scuffed. Like for example, that Cologne where you don't even arrive with the rest of the team, you arrive, get off a plane, and play like a losers bracket game. Like that's ridiculous. They can't judge that as normal. So with this guy, I still give him a little bit of ramp up time where he could still have like 2 months or 3 months more to get to his peak level. Because actually, like you were saying there, mate, I think people underestimate about this guy is another reason, much like Simple, that I was so sure he'll be good again, is because one, not only does the eye chest deck out, he's a very talented player, but he also, like you say, he also has a very good grinder ethic, by the way, like where he'll just play a billion games. So understandably, players like that, when they've been out of the game for a while, especially not officials, they're going to need a bit of time to ramp up again. But I think this is a player where absolutely, I think his talent level is mega. And he's the one player for me where if you just get, look, I wouldn't say this about other players because it'd be ridiculous, but because he has been out of the game, I do think he could get like 10% better. And if he gets 10% better, they will win so many more of these games. They're already like right there. They're so close to actually being like, I don't know, like the 5th best team or something. Like they have games where they look good. They almost beat bloody Navi at that Rio event.
Yeah.
But I think he's still the one for me where it's like some games he's really good, some games he's just all right. If he can take over, I think they can get it really. Because I'm with you. All the rest of the pieces, I also do put a lot of pressure on Kicks, and I've got to say, because I think he's got good pieces and good roles, like you said. Everyone else in the squad's pretty much established. I think Tessus and Shush are just fire. Like, again, for me, this is why I know Astralis. There's got to be something weird going on with their GMing, because if I were them, I'd be just putting stars around these guys and making a team with them. This would be my Danish super team, you know what I mean? Like, I'd have these guys plus, I don't know, Device plus, you pick who you want, like Starn or something like that. And then on the angle of Nerds, I actually think in general, it's just this team not being good's made people forget about Nerds. Like, if you watch him play, he is still one of the best riflers in the world. And also, his game completely suits CS2 in a way some of the more passive riflers didn't. This guy is the up-tempo guy who runs in and does the 3K highlight with an AK. Like, so I feel like this is another team where on paper they've got everything. Like, I'm just waiting for it to all properly. It's starting to come together a bit, but I feel like this major even could be where it happens. Like, I said it on the desk, even though they end up losing in Espo. I feel like this is a team that can be in the playoffs of the major. I think they're actually a pretty canny team, as we say in England.
Yeah, it's a good comparison, by the way, and I'm not only saying that because they're both from Israel, but I kind of feel like Heroic have their own flames with Nerds. They are incredibly similar as players. And one thing I was going to ask you about, you mentioned it briefly, but you did Heroic were that Espo event in Finland, right, which you worked in. They still lost the final 2 ends, which, in my opinion, was a massive blunder on their side, and ends just lucked through it. But
they could have won that also. They were really close
what
games.
Do you think the reason was for that? And do you see that potentially repeating itself with Heroic? Because I think we can both agree on the fact that the ceiling with this lineup looks really high, and it feels like the more time you give them, the better they're going to become. But what led to them just dropping the ball in that grand final against Sens when that was the team that Hey had already beaten? They were supposed to win it 95% probably. Heroic was supposed to lift that trophy. What went wrong?
I mean, first of all, I don't think it's reasonable that anyone could really expect Glaive to like top frag some of the maps and have like, I think I pulled it up now. For the whole final, Ted, it was a 4-map series online, and he had 90 ADR for the final. He's like a fucking, like, isn't he like a 29-year-old boomer from Source or something? You know what I mean? Like, that already is like, you don't expect that to happen again. And then secondly, I'll also throw this out there. One of the biggest factors that I think went in the favor of events at this tournament was they basically hadn't played with this new lineup. So even though, as you said, they played like a group stage game, that's almost like the first game Zens is even playing though. So I think if you are people, like, by the way, I can tell you right now, Saw is one of the highest paid coaches in all of World Counter-Strike. It's actually why he joined Heroic. But the problem is, you're somewhat nerfing him if he hasn't got any fucking data to work with. Like, he has to have the demos to go watch. The difference is, NKJ, the coach of Ents, has all those games. In fact, he had all of IM Rio from the week before to watch with Heroic. I think if you're Heroic, you're going into it thinking, we're just supposed to be better. If we play our game, we probably win. But we can't really know the nuances of the other team. And also, if you look at the stars in Ents, they've definitely done what I was referencing on the other video with Gamer Legion. They've clearly gone for, like, I'm going for young mechanical studs here who are like the future, but they're not actually like established players who have got the experience of being the top team. In fact, some of them, if you don't know, coming straight from academies even. So I also think it's one of those examples of like a perfect storm of like, you have so little information, you can't even know how they're going to play. Then of all the factors, the old bloody Source boomer just outfrags you and does some crazy. And lastly, as I said a second ago, it also was very close. Like, there's a world where it's just the other way around. And it's like Ents loses 3-1 and it's actually Heroic winning. So I actually think the margins were fairly thin. I know what you mean. It was a little bit underwhelming because you look at the end against players. You're like, really? You're losing to these? But to be fair, some of them also kind of smurfed in some of those games, mate.
No. I'm big up on Kaspersky and Naito being incredibly good players, and I still think SDY is a tier 1 rifle, no matter which angle
Sure. No, he's always been
you
good.
use to
Yeah.
look at him. Yeah, exactly. I just found it awkward because they were a new team and that was their first event with those guys.
Even if people don't know, some guy young in the final, even literally on Vertigo, had a round where he fucking aced the other team. Like, it's such a mega ace as well. It was really good.
Yeah.
Like, again, these are things that just don't normally happen. As you say, he's like a role player. He's like a good player, like quality. He's not fucking acing you. So I think a little bit of that was like, it must just have been a nightmare day for you, heroic, mate.
Yeah, I can back the angle with the handicap in terms of the prep though, because as I told you, I think it aligns with the point I made about the coaching staff that I hold really highly for heroic. But before we move into the tier list, because obviously there's a couple things that we're gonna discuss there. The one thing I will ask you now is, because we're having all those conversations, I'm gonna throw in a bit of a similar question to the one that we had in the previous group. But if you're looking at all the teams that are supposed to be the quote-unquote outsiders, we're not gonna throw an NIP here. They're nor here nor there. They're just in their own tier list and demise and whatever. I don't know what the case is there. But you're looking at Bar, G2, Spirit, Eternal Fire, VP, Heroic, Astralis, which are probably the teams that we're expecting to go through. If you had to look at the others and say, you know what, those guys actually do play good Counter-Strike. I've had the chance to watch them. I believe they can still weigh a spot. Is there someone else who has left an optimistic, positive impression that you think people should keep an eye on out of the lesser teams?
Ooh, I mean, the obvious one, I actually also got to see this team at Espo, is probably Bait.
Sure.
I actually feel like the biggest problem Bait have is it's another team where name value tricks you, because you look at the name value and you go, oh, I remember NPL. Wasn't he the guy who was shit in Navi and Simple just raged it? And it's like,
Right.
no, he's the guy where they just mega cynically put him in all the worst spots in Navi, who, by the way, at the time, the expectation was supposed to win every tournament and has got the fucking GOAT playing in their team and like electronic and mega players. And then also, like I just said, he was also getting literally like carved out by his fucking best teammate and his team, like thrown under the bus every fucking time. So I don't think people realize that guy isn't at all like that on this team. And this team, he's like the IGL. He's arguably like their best player. He's like a really good player. And he's got a totally different vision on the game. And he's a way more impactful player. Same thing with Head Trick. You're thinking, oh, I remember that guy. Wasn't he like the not very good ARPA in the LXCB NIP? That's the one where I always tell this story. He wasn't even a fucking ARPA when they bought him. Like, for real, whoever in Navi did that one, you actually absolutely tricked. Like that Head Trick move was like that. We've got Monacy at home in Navi. You know what I mean? Because like everyone saw Monacy go to G2 and they went, what a sick move. He's still up. And then it's like Navi, like dressed up Head Trick. Like, oh, look, I've got Monacy too. And then the joke is, if people don't know, he was actually a fucking rifler in that team and he was good. So what you see now is, look, he's actually embraced being an ARPA, but he's also, now that he doesn't have that pressure on me, he's blossomed in a way he didn't in NIP, where he was playing. Remember as well, the guy was like a 17-year-old Ukrainian player playing with like fucking config, res, you know what, like the most ridiculous, like a random mix of players. Basically, there was no cultural fit, there was no experience fit, they had no history together. You look at this squad, they're way tighter as a squad. This is actually like a pretty solid, like dark horse team for me. Like, put it this way, if Bait doesn't qualify to this major, they'll be the team that like spoils another team. They'll be the one that beats Astralis or Heroic in a one-off and ruins their tournament. You know, I actually feel like this, for me, not only did I think they were good in Espo, but when I watched them in my prep, I was like, it's actually sort of an underrated team, because as I said, it just doesn't have name value for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I back that. I think if there was an award for the best tier 2 team of this year that is making a breakthrough, you'd probably have to compete between Bait and 3D Max. That would be the debate. And as you pointed out with Bait, that's the fun part, because Head Trick used to, because the Academy League, the We Play Academy League was still a thing back then, and I used to cast it for the last couple of seasons.
He was good, right?
He was fantastic. But he only oped for one season. He was a rifle before that. So it was crazy. Like, he was good as an oper. Himself and NPL were together on that team, and they were both insane. But that was the Academy League, and it's different when you just get thrown in the big league. And as you pointed out, a lot of people were comparing him to Monacy, which is extra pressure. Even if he goes out and says, I'm my own player, it's still going to have it to the back of your mind. You grew up with Monacy, and everyone's comparing you to him now. But yeah, I think Bait have a really good fundamentals going into this one. I think NPL has done a great job with the game plan, and honestly, I think the role players on this team, Essenthio, Kurtka, Alex, who's got some star roles on some maps, but especially Essenthio and Alex, I think they're doing an exceptional job. And Kurtka's a great, I mean, I want to say that in the nicest way possible. He is a great janitor on that team. He just does everything
Right.
that no one else wants to do, but he's doing a fantastic job at it. And then Essenthio didn't have a single official game on HLTV before the start of this calendar year. He's grown up a lot. It was a pain watching him at the start, which is completely normal when he's coming in with zero experience. That Bay team had, I think, was 12 or 13 consecutive best of 3 losses after they picked up Hetrick, by the way. And now they're that good. Yeah, this team has grown massively, so I'm completely on with you on this one. And before we get into the tier list, I'll just give an honorary shout out. Again, I'm gonna say 3D Max because I just think those guys are on the right way to success, and I honestly believe, even though Lucky's probably the only really famous name and Mac has been around for such a long time, I think Exorcist and Gravity are heavily underrated as players. By the way, that's a fun fact. Exorcist in the last 1.5 years has played every single bloody rifle role that exists in the game. I've casted this guy. This is the only guy that's made me redo my prep 50,000 times for the same team, by the way, because he played entry, he played lurk, he played anchor, he played pack player, he played support, he's played absolutely everything. And 3D Max is just a team that has the protocols. And you said that, I think, which was the team? We made that point about Soul in the previous episode, right, with their nuke. You're looking at 3D Max. The Anubis that 3D Max plays is one of the best in the world, and I'm gonna die on that stone that they have one of the best Anubises, and it's I think it's them and Sangel that are gonna surprise a lot of people with the Anubis quality. So I want to throw them in there.
Another map a lot of people play as well. If you notice that, a lot of people that tends to be at the bottom end of the map pool, but they're willing to play it.
Yeah, it's really similar to the Soul one. And another one, I don't know how much you've seen from Passion UA, by the way. Do you have any knowledge of those guys? Bar Kane being the coach, obviously he's a legend.
In the other video, when you asked me that question, where it was like, which one team would you pick to have known? I was going to pick this one, but that's mainly because, like, one, I barely know any of the players, as you say, and it might even be a negative they have Kane, because if you don't know, people think he was a bit of an idiot in Na'Vi, even though I don't actually, because I actually know his history from 1.6, and he was like an IGL and stuff. So I imagine, what I would imagine is this. My guess on him is he's someone who probably does have knowledge. Like, I actually think, by the way, knowledge is the obvious thing that scales in Counter-Strike. You can acquire more and more over time. You build up more, like, thought processes. You learn philosophically more things. So if anyone's been in the game long enough, I assume they have something going for them. But I would guess in his case, I don't know, maybe he didn't translate it to that generation of Na'Vi players or whatever. In the squad like this, to be fair, I'm sure everyone has to listen to him. They're probably more malleable players. Just the problem is I barely know any of these players. So if I had to pick a roster, this would have been the one I would have picked to, like,
the problem is
flunk the event.
The
Are they secretly good or something?
Yeah, the only one that actually played Counter-Strike before this lineup got a sample, and this is, by the way, for the people that don't know, this is Zinchenko's team, the football player, right? This is his organization.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, he even played an official against Bleed, and he won a map against Bleed. They lost the series, but he won a nation against Bleed at the start of the year. So yeah, that's a fun fact. Fear is the only one that people will know because of his time on The Witchers, right? And because he played with Smuya, he played a lot of FPL streams and stuff like that. And also, I think, was he a part of the Navi Academy? I think he's a product of the Navi Academy as well. So he is the one that you're looking at, and you're probably going to recognize, and he's the in-game leader. I'm just going to give it away. We're not going to spend too much time talking about them, but this team is playing one of the cleanest Counter-Strikes coming out of, because I'm counting them for an academy team, because all of them are just unknown players pretty much to the broader audience. This team is playing legitimate, really structured, really disciplined Counter-Strike. Jambo and Jacasmo are fucking monsters in the server as well. So this is a team that I would say, actually, I'm not going to be shocked if they upset some of the top teams in a best of 1. In a best of 3, I don't know how they're going to hold their own, even though the Veto is pretty solid with them. But this is a team that I would keep an eye on. But with that being said, I think we've spent enough time talking about overall just the teams. I think we can get into the tier list now, because there's some things to unveil there. The good news is we've already said a lot of the things that were worth saying. So now it's just picking up the picture together. So I've just decided to be a little bit funny with those, so I'm gonna read them out again. I mean, not for all of them, but we have again the top 2, and I've just put in why is it G2 and Spirit in this category. Then we have should go through, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then we have 50-50. Then we have possible but not probable, and then we have should have tried the Asian RMR like some others did. So we're gonna start it off with the should have tried the Asian RMR.
I mean, like I say, I think there has to be some of the teams at the bottom, right? Like, wouldn't that be like Sashi, something like that? You know?
Okay.
Are they an obvious team?
I'd say it's really difficult with this group because a lot of those tier 2 teams that there are in this group, and some of them have played tier 3, have had really strong periods throughout 2024. But if you're going off of recent form, I'd say Sashi is probably one of the teams that have been struggling a lot for me lately. Yeah, I would back that.
I'd put them bottom. Yeah.
Okay.
I think similarly for me, I might even put 9Pandas there.
That's a fair point to make.
Which, by the way, I actually think is a bomber, because the other thing I hate about the 9Pandas one is there's actually a player there I think is absolutely just trapped, which is the player. No, it's Shelfie.
Oh, okay.
That guy Shelfie, who used to be on Forza.
Yeah.
Bro, it's not even just that I've heard this. I've heard people literally in teams have tried to sign this player,
Yeah.
but they were being asked for stuff like, like $400,000 buyouts or whatever, which is like, look, he actually, by the way, might even justify that he is a good player, like he's a skilled rifler if people don't know. But the problem is, it's really hard to gamble 400,000 or 300,000 or whatever on someone who hasn't really ever done it at tier 1. So I've always thought that player, by the way, Resort as well, was pretty solid if people saw him when he was on Aurora.
Shelfie's not gelling now, by the way.
I mean, these are good players. Like, they could be much better than probably these teams, but I just don't think the team's very good, unfortunately, from what I've seen.
Yeah. You know what's a funny story that I have, by the way, with Shelfie? He's one of those guys, again, similar to degster, because back in the day, obviously, I used to spend a lot more time in the Bulgarian Counter-Strike TeamSpeak. I don't do that anymore, but he's one of those guys that the majority of the players here would just tell me they absolutely hate playing against him, but it wouldn't be that type of I think he's cheating, I think he's blah, 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 blah. They would just be like, this guy is fucking insane at the game. And that's like 2017, 2018, even maybe a little bit before that.
He did look very skilled. He just looks like a skilled rifler, right?
Yeah, and everyone's told me that he's a really smart player, so I completely back you. I mean, I would put 9Pandas in the same category, although I think Shelfie is a great player, and I highly rate Result. Now, I will throw in a bit of a helper in there. And that's going to be, I think that would be a hot take considered for a lot of people, but I actually want to put Aurora in here. And the reason I want to put Aurora in here, although I've always been a guy that's been bigging them up, and obviously you're going to tell me if you agree with that. First of all, Aurora have changed in-game leadership, and now Norway's gelling, not Lucky. Second of all, Aurora at the RES Belgrade LAN in the last 3, 4, 5 months have looked like, pretty much after the result situation and maybe even a little bit before that, they've just looked like a team that is so easy to tilt, irritate, get under their skin.
Looks like no one wants to play for this team.
No one wants to
play. I mean, the joke is, like the Result thing, people literally didn't want to play for this team. But it also, you just get the vibe like it's collapsed internally somehow, isn't it?
Yeah, and also you have that conversation, that really weird rumor that Deco just wants to retire while he's 23, right? Step down, and they're and they're already thinking about just promoting Griggs from Aurora Youngblood, who's a phenomenal oper, by the way. He's a great player from Belarus, but it's just the fact that you're going into this one, you don't know if Deco's going to keep playing. No one seems to be in the mood to actually play with each other. And for me, I really honestly hope that's not the case. But for me, it feels like...
So we're going on intangibles for this one.
Yeah. But for me, it kind of feels like those guys just wanted to give it a go. We qualify for the RMR. Let's try and go to the major to get the stickers and the money and whatever. Just have a good time. But we know things are going to fall apart. Because from the outside, it just feels like nothing's going to work out. On the normal day, I'd put them in 50-50 with a high potential to go through. But I just don't think the circumstances are good enough.
No, I'm with you on that one, mate.
Okay, so we're gonna move to the top now. Any point saying anything, or we're good?
Oh no, I like it. I mean, I think we covered it earlier. I think Spirit actually is just a real team, and then G2 just their players are just too good. Like if they put it this way, even the idea like. My idea of failure for G2 is like just come out last but still qualify. Like I can't even conceive of them not qualifying. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like with that talent you have to qualify. Come on, you can trip over and qualify surely.
Yeah, I think this is clean enough. Okay, so should go through. Who are we putting here?
Right, this is where it gets interesting because it might shock people, but I'm actually going to say Eternal Fire is my first obvious one. Okay. The reason why is I actually do think. Here's what's funny. Are you ready? We're going to blow people's minds here, Ted, with a revolutionary thought.
Looking forward.
Teams aren't static, and it's not like a FIFA football manager type game where you just have the value of the play. You know, he runs 89 every time. They change over the year. Form comes in and out, like teams, how they play is different. Yeah. So in the same ways, I don't think it's the case that people think, well, Tharin, remember when you said Na'Vi winning the major was a fluke? It was a fluke, but the same lineup months later became really good. It's both. It's not either or. So similarly with Eternal Fire, if you remember, they also had like a charmed run at that major. They made top 8 and lost to Na'Vi. Yeah. I actually think that team was mega one-dimensional. That was the team where they had to get you onto Vertigo, which was one of their best maps. They could always upset people. They had to have Xantar Zantares be basically like a top 10 player in the world to have a chance. And then back then, you actually even needed Wicadia, the rookie, to have like the odd good game. I think their team is way better. First of all, it's not just Zantares. Like, I know people made this point as a joke, but it's sort of true. If you ever go and look at the timing, when they actually put the left-handed model in the game, Woxic immediately became good at fucking LAN again. I'm not even trolling, guys. If you ever go, he's actually way better now. He feels like he's 1.5 times better than he was at the beginning of the year, even though that can't be the reason you've got to think in your brain. Maybe it was also, you know, his motivation levels and things going on. But he is actually really good. He's actually pretty good. Like, bear in mind, we don't pick up a lot of AWPers. He's actually sort of like, he's probably like at the bottom of the top 10 AWPers, this guy's. He's actually like a good player again. Zantares, by the way, is just amazing still. He's so overqualified for that team. If it wasn't for the fact they're Turkish, he's already had the big experiment. I feel like this guy, for real, should actually be like someone where on paper, if we take every other factor out, he should be on the shortlist for like FaZe Clan, Falcons. This guy's really good.
Completely.
And then actually, if Wicadia now only has to be like your third best player, now he can make it work because he is a rookie. So he had his little peak at the beginning. He went down a little bit, but you can accept that. He's on his way through the scene. And actually, even though people know I'm not a Major fan, I actually think after the player break, his calls were like twice as good as they were at the beginning part of the year. And what shows that to me that they're actually a team now, Ted, they're not just the Zantares carries on show, is they aren't just Vertigo anymore. Like, first of all, their Anubis got really spicy in the last few months. If you saw that, they could probably shock some big teams on that. Dust 2, they're pretty solid on. By the way, you can imagine a lot of it's like the maps where you can hit them hard and use that fragging power because the skill level of this team is good, actually. People probably underestimate that part, you know. It does have some skilled players. It can definitely shoot people in the head.
Yeah. The dust suit thing, I actually laughed at because it's like it's something that in the Balkan scene it's always been quite prolific that Turkish players are just really good on dust, and you never played Cash against them as well. So if Cash comes back into the veto, then Internal Fire instantly are going to become an even better team. But I back that.
Yeah, ironically,
they look like a really legitimate team. I completely back that, and I would say, I wouldn't even say it's blowing anyone's mind. I would choose the same thing. I would say they're the third best team on the group, but unfortunately we got.
Like, wouldn't you agree? To me, this is also a team. I said it with Aurora. This is another team that's like a dark horse to just make like top 8 of the major. Like, they could probably in the playoffs. If they fuck around with the right matchups, they can. There's a lot of teams that people think are good that these teams could beat.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can beat. They can probably beat anyone bar the teams that are going to reach the final, for example, and win the event, if you know what I mean. But everyone that's below them is going to have a really tough time upsetting those guys, which I think for me is the definition of a top team. The guys that just don't lose to anyone below. They're just the gatekeepers.
And it's like you said earlier about well, I forget which player it was. Oh, it was a fucking degster or whatever, wasn't it? Okay. No, who was the player you were saying that everyone was saying they didn't want to play in FPL or whatever it was? Who was the like? Maybe it was like a lesser name player. Who were we talking about when you said that?
Was it Fear? We were talking
Could be that guy. I can't remember. It was someone early. It was on one of the lesser teams. But anyway, I would say the same thing applies to Eternal Fire. Eternal Fire is one of those teams. There you go. There you go. Eternal Fire is one of those teams where I don't care what their ranking is. There are so many other teams don't want to play this team. I'll tell you right now. They look really dangerous in that regard too.
Yeah, they are. Okay, so I think we can leave in there. Okay, so who are the other teams that we're putting in should go through then? We can go for 3 or 4 teams. It depends.
This is
on
where
how
I'm going to already. Other people might not agree, but I think Heroic. That's where I'm putting Heroic there.
Yeah,
I'm putting them right in the mix there.
Okay, we already have that conversation.
Here's the biggest problem. Now is when it gets really hard. Yeah, because the problem is I am not a Virtus.pro believer. They're another team, by the way, where I'm doing it right now on Wikipedia. Every time I see their roster, it doesn't make sense how bad they are. It doesn't make sense. Like, even when this team wins games, Ted, it's like literally like the meme of like it's 3 maps, every fucking round played, barely win. And you're just like, oh, and that'll be like a game against like, you know, like fucking Falcons or something, bro. You'll just be like, really? Like, and so this team, like, they maybe I don't even think they get many upsets, mate. Like, how often do they even beat a better team? It feels like, 1 out of every 5 times. It's just kind of, it's just to me, it's an example of a roster where on paper, nobody is bad, but nothing works about this roster. Like, even the players themselves, like, play worse. Like, by the way, James isn't particularly good. I mean, by the way, shout out to HLTV. Now they fixed that fucking rating. He was never that good. He was the bizarre player that skewed the rating somehow. Yeah. So he was a good player, but he was never like a star player for me. Sadly, Flit has just completely withered on the vine in this roster. Fame, by the way, remember when they won that major, was one of the up-and-coming players. He's irrelevant in this team. So you look at the squad, it's basically just like Electronic has sort of like some above average games. That's about it.
Yeah.
The rest of the team's a mess. And the worst thing is, everyone knows in this team, Norbert's the player who obviously has to eat shit in terms of roles. And yet in every bloody interview, they imply like maybe we'll kick him out. So like, I also get the feeling, mate, this is another team where there's not a great lot of morale in this squad and a great like team spirit, as it were. This is a team where it's quite well known. It's even been said by the CEO, sort of like, look, if we don't do well, we're just going to fire people and buy more people. Like, I think this team's on the hot seat completely, mate. If they bomb this RMR, I could see half this roster going, you know.
I completely agree. And you know what's the fun part about it? I honestly think that Norbert is probably the only player that's doing his job to 100%. Or
He's
at least
pretty
90%.
good, isn't he? Yeah,
I really like Norbert. I've always liked Norbert.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part, because he's always getting all the shit. I don't see why. Honestly, don't see why. But yeah.
I think, no joke, part of it's his name. Because if you don't know, that name was the name of a really stupid Eddie Murphy comedy movie.
I know
like
Norbert,
about 15 years.
yeah.
And so I know it sounds mad, but it's like calling yourself like Ace Ventura and then being like the role player, mate. Like everyone's just going to think you're a meme, you know. Whereas I agree with you, he's actually like an underrated player. People don't know, also. Maui wasn't trolling. He also is just better in CS2 than he was in CSGO. Like, he's one of the few players that just sort of like leveled him up a bit.
Yeah, he's always...
So I have to say, that's why I'm tortured here, because I feel like Ted. I can't possibly put VP in this category. They surely have to go in like the third or fourth one, right? But it feels so wrong to do that, though. You look at the players, you're like, am I really putting them below? You know, like,
you know what's the worst part about it? During the Thunderpick group stage, I casted VP lose 2 best of 3s to OG, which was a new lineup with a new in-game leader, a stand-in playing who's on tryouts in 2 days. They lost 2 best of 3s to them. So if I have to be completely honest, if I had to just forget about the nicknames and who's on the team, I'd actually put them in possible, but not probable. I really would.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair, mate.
I think you're looking at 3D Max, for example. I'd put my money on 3D Max to beat VP probably 4 out of 5 best of 3s that
I'll give you another angle that I hate about VP as well. This is why I actually do feel like if James gets fired either from his job or being IGL, I think it's deserved. I'm sorry. He's had enough years now with mega talents this last year and a half as well. It's not like, remember the old days, he used to work with like lesser talents and it was like his style that made you win. Now it feels like the style's what holds you back. And then also, I'll just throw this out there. I also think one of the worst qualities they have for a tournament like this, you notice how I've gone out of my way to stress that if some team is like uniquely good on one map that everyone plays, that gives you an edge, right? VP also has that terrible thing about teams that don't work, where they're not even particularly good on any maps. Like what their map pool is actual ass. Like it's actually pretty bad.
They were good at an overpass, but it's gone now.
That was obviously, by the way, that literally nerfed them removing overpass. Yeah, that's another factor. And also, they're another team where you look at the experience levels. You'd think like just from past teams, you could pick out squads. You can't. You can't go, well, Electronic was on Navi, so I guess he's good on nukes. Yeah. Bad on like all the maps. I actually think this is one of the worst teams at vetoing in Counter-Strike as well, by the way. So I alluded to that earlier, but you'll see in this fucking RMR, mate. This is a nightmare team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that one. And I think they're rightfully in that category. But we could still put a couple more in should go through. Is there someone else that you can put in should go through?
I mean, if I have to put someone, the obvious one is going to be Astralis, surely.
Sure.
That feels like one I have to give a chance to.
Yeah, as we said, even if it's shaky, they still should make it through, at least.
I just feel like, look, on paper, even just, if I boil them down to this, you do have Device, who's now not IGLing as an AWPer, and you have Yabi and Stown. If those 3 players play well in their roles, that can get you, you got the 3 lives, that can get you through. I think that should still on paper be enough. It's just, in fact, my prediction for Astralis will be this. They creep through this RMR, but then they just bomb the major. I think they make it there. I think they make it there, especially with this format.
Yeah, I can back that. Okay, and we're happy with leaving those 3 here?
Yes.
Okay, so we're moving to... let's finish off possible but not probable, because we started it already. So who are the teams that need the stars to align for them, pretty much, if they want to go through? But you are still seeing a world where something happens. Like, for example, I don't know, maybe a Big if Krimbo decides that he wants to play like Krimbo.
This is the one that kills me, because Big is also a team where... This is why I know CS2 is just a fundamentally different game to CSGO, but it's going to take us years to kind of, in hindsight, know what the mechanisms were. Because on paper, this is the best roster Big ever had. This looks really good on paper. Like, you even look at all the roles and you're like, mate, this is like, I guess you see it. People don't know. Krimbo is another player where, at this point in time, you know that whole Tabson narrative of like, he could have been on FaZe or that was years ago now, guys. Tabson himself is like quite old in his career and he's clearly set to be the IGL. It's actually Krimbo that's now doing exactly the same thing. Like, on paper, paper, I'm not even trolling. I actually think Krimbo would have been more justified being picked up by G2 than Malbs. Like,
I
this
agree.
guy just shows he has like fucking skills. And by the way, he could definitely play like fucking anchor spots.
I mean,
He's just got the game for it. So
he could
I
still
think this guy
go.
on paper should be really, he probably should still go, by the way. Because the sad thing about this squad is, this squad also I found is underwhelmed. Again, I actually think the GMing was very well done. I even like bringing like some of the coaching staff in,
Yeah.
but somehow it just doesn't produce the results. In fact, bizarrely, it's actually a lot of the years ago scoffed big lineups that would get the kind of deep runs you expect. So I'm torn on this one, Ted, because I do feel like if you're saying like if everything comes together, this team could do it for sure. Could they roster? But they don't at the moment, so I'm kind of torn on where we put them. And I'm with you. If we're doing the 3D Max angle, maybe they're the sleeper we're putting in this third category, right?
Yeah, I think they are. I honestly think 3D Max is the sleeper we're putting in the third category, because I think bar those guys, they probably play the best Counter-Strike. I'd say probably fundamentally their playbook even goes deeper than the one of Astralis on any day of the week. But yeah, I think with Big is a difficult decision to make, and I don't like putting them there either, because obviously I also think the rigoN pickup was great, and I've always really highly rated rigoN as a player, but it's just recent results. It's just the lack of good performances that has to put them in there. But with one, I guess, big little, well, big little, all right. Yeah, just got caught up in the pun. Don't mind it. Native English, not really there, but yeah, with a bit of a bit of a small font text next to it, Big could still play good Counter-Strike. They probably will play good Counter-Strike. They probably will be solid when it comes down to the utility, when it comes down to the anti, when it comes down to the prep. It's just whether it's going to fall apart or not, because they have the pieces. I'm completely on with you
Oh,
there.
by the way, you've nailed it there as well. There's another thing about Big that is why I can't believe in them, bro. All versions of Big, but even the modern one, they are one of the worst teams ever at playing, in theory, good fundamental CS and then never closing the game out.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This team is criminal when they get to like an 11-11 game. They just know they're going to lose it or lose an OT. So that's the other, like, Praceway. Here's an example where we could already get spicy, Ted. You know, you've just put VP and Big into the second to last category.
Yep.
I'm not even trolling. Not only have we put 3D Max above them, to do a casual, we're already lost our minds. Bro, I actually think above those two teams, we're also going to put Bait.
Yeah, we are.
Why aren't we right now
Yeah.
with the current form and these rosters? I think we have to, because let's be real, VP and Big are sort of failed rosters. Even though on paper it looks dynamite, it hasn't worked. These teams we're talking about, 3D Max and Bait. If this was an online cup tomorrow, we'd be taking these teams to like be in the final or something, mate. These are real teams that play, grind, put in loads of hours, and you can tell how good they are. I mean, look, obviously, again, we can never know the land factor. We can't know how like Hedrick's going to play on land.
Sure.
But I'm going to give them the chance. Whereas actually, like, I don't look at VP and Big and go, they're definitely going to be sick on land. Like, if anything, they're underwhelmed on land as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a valid point. And the worst part about it, I think, do we have another team left for 50-50 actually? Because now I'm looking at the list. Do we put someone else there?
I don't know, because actually the one team I did want to ask you about, the one that I'm actually very,
TSM?
very unsure about is TSM.
Okay.
Because I also feel like TSM's actually, if people know I know rigoN, I've known him for quite a while.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly shrewdly put together roster. Bearing in mind, it's not like a lot of the big names. Like obviously that was like the ecstatic core, people know. But if you can't get the players that are, if you have to make a Danish team and you can't get the ecstatic core, this is almost like the best other team you could make. Like a lot of the roles work for me. I know, again, they haven't been to the land, so people haven't watched them play, but I can't tell. I can't tell whether this could be like an all right team or it's going to be just an also run. I'm not sure.
So my judgment on TSM, by the way, I think they picked up sirah from Mouse NXT, first of all, quite recently, who's a 16.
It's quite hyped, right?
Yeah, he's really good. He really is really good. He's kind of like, it was him and PR, the guy, the kid from the Czech Republic, that were regarded as the two biggest talents on that Mouse NXT team, and that was a team with Krisen as well, who I rate really highly. So I think it's just a generation of Mouse NXT that deserved the promotion, but that just couldn't, because the previous generation is still really young, right?
They're in their spot.
So
yeah, sure.
exactly. So I really like the sirah add-on. I am a big Valde fan, and I just think that this guy's consistency throughout his career has been insane, even though the teams that he's been on have never actually been that successful. I think he's probably one of the most unfulfilled players coming out of the Danish scene, and for me, it's just a regret that he never went on to Astralis, because I think he deserved it on multiple occasions. And I rate him as an in-game leader. I think Acor is a pretty solid oper. I honestly think TSM have good pieces, and the one thing they don't have, although Zyphon is fucking crazy when he has a good day, the one thing they probably don't have is you looking at the team and feeling like firepower-wise, this is a terrifying team. But the one thing I want to add to that, Zyphon, in the last couple of, let's say, games that they played around the close qualifier for the RMR was farming. back then. If sirah is comfortable enough at the RMR, I actually think TSM have the basis, because from what I saw at the close qualifier for the RMR, they are playing, well, they might be considered a one-trick pony with their Inferno. Their Inferno is really good, especially the T-sides are great. Really solid. Everything is calculated. There's no useless utility being utilized and whatnot. And that tells you that a team puts a lot of effort into the details, right? This is always a good thing. And I'm expecting that from rigoN and valde. But there is a big if, because they haven't played any officials in the last month, which tells me that a preparation has been done properly. And I really want to believe that the prep is going to get them as far. My only concern is, will sirah be comfortable enough? Because if he is comfortable enough to play on 75% of the potential he's got, I actually think on a good day TSM could make an upset and potentially go 0-2 and then farm their way up with building up the confidence against some of the lesser teams early on in best of threes, and then be able to get one upset against a good team in a 2-2 matchup. So I really do believe that TSM is one that could be considered a 50-50. But my only concern is, if I put TSM in a 50-50, I gotta put Passion UA in 50-50 as well. And I'd rate Passion a little bit higher than TSM.
Okay. But the other one I would ask is just, what do you think about PARIVISION? That's another dark horse potentially, right?
Yeah, but I think that's more of a possible but not probable, because the stars really need to align with dastan and the impact that he's going to be able to bring in. I really believe that you give him a little bit of time. Maybe they do a couple changes now in the offseason, but with some of the players that they have, I really think with him at the helm, and let's say Patsi, Frost, I think if you build around that, Belchanok is a good player as well. I think if you build around that, you can make a team out of this, but I wouldn't say that they're above possible but not probable at this
By the way, one thing to say on the TSM one as well.
Sure.
Obviously, the big problem with valde is it's not valde playing like super anchor like he used to do before. He's obviously the IGL now.
Yeah.
But first of all, he's had like a decent amount of time now to get some reps under his belt. And also, he is actually a rare example of a player where I actually do think it makes sense that they transition to become IGL, because here's the key difference. People might know that actually a former teammate of his is a player I famously had a lot of disputes with, which is, even though I was actually for a long time friends with NBK, when NBK wanted to be the IGL, I can tell you the reason why I always said I didn't think it would work is because NBK's personality is actually very straightforward. And I would say essentially, I think he actually even recently literally publicly said he was diagnosed with autism or something. But basically, he's not as good at sort of like the social aspects. Like, here's the difference. He's the kind of guy where, maybe he's a bulky guy, you can appreciate this. He's the kind of guy who would just tell you straight to your face what he thinks you did wrong.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, certain people, like the French scene especially, they didn't appreciate that, man. They want it, to be like dressed up a little bit. They want it to be a bit flowery and to be very polite about how you do it. Yeah, so the difference is, I always thought his problem would be, he might even be right, he might have like the right call and the right read and the right thing, but a secret I have to say that is a skill of being IGL I never appreciated was, it is the human element of, can you communicate to the person, can you get them to buy in, can you make them feel like, for example, you're helping them, not criticizing them. The difference is, I think valde is way more in that latter category. He is a guy where he is a very easy person to talk to relate to. He doesn't come across as a big ego, but I can tell you, he's really smart as well. He was not only as a player, but he is one of those guys where, like, if you were to pick a non-IGL player to break a game down, this is the sort of person who could give you some good insights and tell you some things about how he... So I also think you look at this squad, between him and Nico, who were the veterans, they're also playing all the dirty roles, which is what you want, right? You want these young stars to just go and shoot people in the head. And then also, lastly, people might know, every team Acor's been in, I've talked to his coaches, his IGLs, that is one of the weirdest players ever, because he's one of these players, Ted, who doesn't understand how good he is. Like, he actually thinks of himself. He's like not a very high confidence player, believe it or not. And it's like he doesn't see the player we see in the server. So when I see him in the server, I'm like, bro, if this guy was like aggressive, like, put it this way, if he was just like fucking Russian or something, mate, he'd have that like wrinkle style play, be like ballsy as fuck. Remember, he's one of the fastest fire speed players. He's got really good movement. You would think this guy would be a demon, whereas instead I've heard basically he sort of requires like the IGL to sort of like push him a bit, he's the guy who sort of needs you to tell him to go to do his, to take the spot and to call his own number. So if they can do that in this team, like, I actually think it's a kind of a sleeper roster, like I'm saying. I know people are going to look and go, it's just a retirement home for all players. No, it isn't. Like, this actually could, like, low-key be like a decent team.
I mean, we're saying retirement home for all players. sirah's 16, 17. Zyphon's in his early 20s, so whoever's saying that, I mean, yeah, sure, okay. And you know what? I actually am ready to blow some people's minds now, because I think we agree on that. Let's put them in 50-50. Come on.
Yeah, do it.
I think we can big up TSM, but the one thing I want to ask you if you're all right with,
And as
'cause-
you said, because they haven't played any officials for a while, if anything, they're like a black box. No one can
Yeah.
really know. Maybe they have been grinding, and in the boot camp, they can only come out with like 2 maps we don't even expect them to be good on. Could be, right?
Yeah, those are my expectations. And if I'm putting TSM in 50-50, I honestly believe, and that might be, I think only probably tier 2 casters will agree with me on this one, but I think Passion UA deserve a place in there. And you know what? If the Soul one and should go through was my signature mark in the previous tier list, then this is going to be my signature mark in this one. Is putting TSM and Passion UA into 50-50. And now we have one last
You notice we've intentionally left this team till the end here, Ted.
Yeah,
because
I didn't mention
if there was ever a
time.
team. By the way, I'll tell you the best. This story is a microcosm of why Nip fucking sucks and there's no hope. Because, bro, I went to that Espo event, right? Yeah. Remember, when I'm going to the Espo, I know there's not all the top teams there. So what I'm thinking is, you look on the bright side, right? Hey, I'm going to get to see Heroic. They were just awesome at IM Rio. I'm going to get to see Mongols, one of my favorites, like an up-and-coming team. Can they win the event? I'm even going to get to see, like, Glaive, the GOAT with Ensign. And you know what? I'm going to get to see one of my favorite up-and-coming players, Wrinkle. I never got to see him, Ted, because unfortunately, day one, we weren't in the arena, and he got disqualified. He got knocked out of the tournament in last place. So I didn't even get to the land in time to see them play. And the saddest thing about this team is, I'm just going to say it right now, this team is a prison for Wrinkle, because this guy is good. I will say he has a really extreme style. Like when he doesn't hit, by the way, he'll completely feed the game.
Yeah.
But he's not just saying it for like cool points. This guy really does have like a simple-esque, like he thinks he is like the god carry. And I fucking love when AWPers think that, bro, because that is the role where I do think if you're like a demon at AWP and you're self-confident, you can put yourself in position. You create your own duels. You don't wait for the IGL to save you. I think those are the most exciting players to see, especially with rising talents. But the problem is this team just doesn't work, bro. It's just a bad squad. Like it's another one of those teams where people almost like neutralize each other and they just don't do the things you do. I actually think that initial blast where they beat like FaZe and Wrinkle had like a carry set, I think that fooled so many people for like 2 months or something. Because this squad, it's not just the things where like the Maxter went out of the lineup and all that jazz. Like even when he was in the lineup, it didn't really work. Like it's just never really clicked, which I do think, like I say, is sad because you look at Wrinkle. By the way, he's obviously another one, like, you know, what is Bear doing in Texas? You know that one with us, that like fucking actor. What the fuck is a Ukrainian up-and-coming stud AWPer doing in like a partially Swedish team?
Well,
like, is it even good? Like, if you put this guy on so many other teams, he'd be cooking, bro. You know what I mean?
You know what's a funny angle? They probably decided ruining one young Ukrainian AWPer's career wasn't enough, so now they're trying to do it a second time. It feels like it, right? I completely agree with it. And you know what's the worst part? I actually feel like it's not the fault of anyone on the team, because you're looking at, for example, Isaac, who I still rate really highly, and I still think he's a really intelligent player and a really smart guy, and I still think he could do better on a better team. I was really happy when he got the chance to get picked up by NAP, because I always thought he was underrated. Rez can still be Rez. He can still be good. He's not that old. He's 26. He can still be a world-class rifle. I think the one thing that I find really precarious about NAP is the fact that it kind of feels like they want their academy guys to fix the issues of an already sinking ship. It's kind of like you're getting Mistim, who used to play NA Counter-Strike in South African Counter-Strike. You put him in the academy. He does well alongside Yokap, who's a big talent, by the way. Yokap was on the Prodigies project, on the Prodigies organization, then on Young Ninjas. They both have high potential. Yokap is sick in my opinion. But then you get those guys, you put them in the most legendary Swedish organization, and you're like, you know what? Look at that dead horse. I want you to revive it, even though I've just put 20 mags of bullets into his brain. They're not going to be able to do it. I think it's just unjustifiable pressure that you're putting on the youngsters, and you're expecting something to change. I would really like them to get an attempt at building something of their own and not having to fix someone else's mistakes or whatever. But yeah, I just think it's really awkward. And yeah, obviously I agree with the Wrinkle point that he's a great guy. By the way, something you're going to find funny. He actually is playing on the simple sensitivity as well. 3.09 on 400 DPI, and that's what Hetrick played on before. That's what Monacy back in the day was playing on, but then he switched.
Okay.
So he's part of that, because you made the simple comparison. He's part of that generation of CAS opers that all wanted to be like simple and just play with the same sense, same crosshair, and I think he's still using it up to this date. But my question to you is, where do you put NIP?
The problem is, I feel like might even be in the last category. I know it sounds mad, but it's got to be the last two. So is it the last or the second last? I mean, it might even be the last. Bro, this team is just bad. I mean, I'm joking about them at like a real LAN. Like even in tier 2, they're pretty bad, right?
Yep. and I'm just gonna agree and put them in here.
Because where else can we put them? Like, there's not really any other reason, right? They're just a fundamentally bad team, I'm afraid, without a lot of
Yeah.
potential.
The one thing I'll say, I casted and played literally 2 days ago, and fundamentally it didn't look too bad. It didn't look too discombobulated, but I don't think the slight improvement they've made over the course of that time is going to be enough to get them to a higher level because the RMR starts so soon. So yeah, I am happy with putting them there. Obviously, we're not doing the who's top, who's bottom of each category. The team is just in the category. That's what we think of them. There's no particular order to it. Bar maybe a Turtle Fire, who are, I think we can agree, the top one here. But yeah, you happy with this one?
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is where we can put an end to it. I am happy with it as well. Hope that everyone's enjoyed watching it as well. Again, wanted to thank you for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me for the group, for the first group. Thank you for joining me for the second group. I really appreciate those 2 hours of your time that you're never gonna be able to get back.
It's all good.
But yeah, guys, thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Of course, for those of you that have been living under rock and don't follow Thorin or the Last Free Nation or the podcast that they're doing with Maui, with Sam, with Tech Girl, I've been a guest on some of those. They're really sick, so go and check them out. And yeah, make sure to catch him while he's live on Twitch, because he's getting into the streamer lifestyle now, and it is hilarious. You can literally go and ask him a question about baseball and he's gonna answer in a 20-minute monologue, so you're gonna have a great time. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm gonna see you really soon. Stay safe. Bye bye.